Hello, this is from Caracas. I'm Nerio Gomez. What happened in Venezuela in 2002, April 2002? On the coup d'etat against President Hugo Chavez, I will talk with General Nerio Galvan Mendez. Please join us for the next few minutes. How do you do, General?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being with us. Well, we could say that the coup d'etat on April the 11th, 2002 had a background. It didn't explode for the sake of exploding that day, but it had a previous preparation.
Well, that April 11th has a background, as you just said, and the background comes from the same historical facts that generated that our Supreme Commander Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías became President of the Republic, including the economic, political, social, cultural, and even health situation that the country was dragging in the last 40 years of what we knew as the Fourth Republic, that came to its worst moment in those years of the 90s, 92 to 98, where our country at that time, its social and sanitary sectors had been neglected. Venezuela was the most pessimistic country in the world. The vast majority wasn't happy enough and wasn't well treated enough, which led us to that historic moment of Commander Hugo Chavez, who comes to assume the presidency in the year of 1998 with his main promise, which it was a constituent, a popular and leading constituent for all people, where people were going to participate and to form each one of the articles of our new constitution, which today is the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and where they could participate in democratic form and also participate in forums, in social groups, in order to form a new legal text that was going to govern the new destinies of the fatherland.
But the legal text bothered some social classes.
Totally. When the legal text becomes popular, leading, participatory, it ceases to be elaborated by small groups of what was the old Fourth Republic, in a representative form, when a group of men distributed the power and made the laws. At that moment, the great promise of the constituent was going to be, first, approved, second, was to be made, third, it was going to be of national knowledge with participation of all the social classes. And this transforming revolutionary document, as it is the constituent, it materializes with the constitution that it is also approved in the year 1909, when Venezuela adopts the name of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and the rights and guarantees that this new constitution supports provide the conditions to carry the maximum happiness to our people.
We reached then the year 2002. What happened?
After the constitution was approved, came the necessary transformations, because Chavez, in the oath he made before the Constitution, when he received the presidency, he saw right there in the hemicycle, when he was receiving the presidency from the hands of President Caldera, swore on a constitution that was already going, that Chavez baptized it as the dying one, to make the necessary transformations that the historical time deserved. And so he did. He began with the constituent, and then came the set of laws necessary to boost the new popular economy, the new social changes, the development of popular power, which did not exist in Venezuela. There were no bodies of participation. Everything was concentrated. And of course, the great deployment, the great dream of Simón Rodriguez, which was free and popular education with the transformations of the laws and tackled to the strategic, the control of Venezuela's main resource, which was the oil.
That already comes from 2001, with the approval of the 49 enabling laws. I've also read that within those laws, the most annoying for the private business class were the law of terrains and the law of hydrocarbons.
Of course, with these hydrocarbon laws, first of all, the oil revenue was subject not only to foreign designs, but to a Creole oligarchy. That's the way Supreme Commander Hugo Chavez called it, represented by business groups that made themselves owners. The head of state, the President of the Republic, did not have access to reliable and accurate information at the moment. of how our oil industry moved. The traditional oligarchies, let's say regional, sub-regional, or blocs, including worldwide oligarchies, they were the owners of Venezuelan oil. We talk about a corporatocracy, a word plutocracy that owned the oil resource, and in this case, the lands that produce food. The commander, with this constitution, with these enabling laws, seek to recover the land for people and achieve the production of food that was needed at that historical moment, and to recover the oil revenue, the strategic product to achieve the economic stability, the fairness, the justice, and the class equality in Venezuela.
In the 2002 coup d'etat, now that we are talking about the private business class, two entities played a key role. Fedecámaras and the Venezuelan Confederation of Workers, who were the leaders of those two groups.
We can say that a group of leaders, of pseudo-leaders, as in the case of the Confederation, who joined incredibly to that coup d'etat. They had to defend the interests of workers, and workers are all those who work, the working class who perform for our country.
It's a trade union organization.
A trade union organization must defend the interests of the workers, and strangely, at that historical moment, before April 11th, joins to Fedecámaras, a business dome, as it is known in Venezuela, with presidents and representatives of the largest companies, mostly transnational, that live not only in Venezuela but in Latin America. And this group, in turn, representatives of workers who did not fulfill their functions, which were often identified in the media as corrupt. They managed to make a hybrid against the interests of people.
Which was the slogan of those two groups?
Well, the slogan was based on well-prepared memes. First, we can remember that famous phrase, "not a step backwards." That means the great group that joined with their slogans and sought the strategic control of the country because they never had neither the tactical nor the operational control. The streets always belonged to the people. The institutions were always democratic, with the doctrine involved by Bolivar. Democratic institutions that work for the people. But in the strategic order, they did manage to cause damages. For instance, to the gas installations and to paralyze some of our oil refining plants, including an administrative part of PDVSA that was totally blocked. And this is added not only to the strategic control of our oil, which caused a huge damage, but also to the alliance of the Creole oligarchy with the corrupted Workers' Confederation that formed a bloc joined also by the media. At that time, the one who was managing it.
Who was managing PDVSA at that time, and on whose side was that person?
Was the General Guaycaipuro Lamera, whom Hugo Chavez had already suspected. At that historical moment, Lamera had gone to the interests of the transnational corporations and big companies, and he had also been affected by a plutocratic thought with the large sums of money that surrounded those businesses. He was captivated, joined those groups, and finally betrayed the basic principles of the Bolivarian Revolution. After that, we could see Lamera through the media calling to the masses to concentrate and direct masses of people in Chuao, for example, in the oil building of PDVSA that today is proudly known as the National Experimental University of the Bolivarian National Army, which today I am its director. I am also the president of the chair of studies related to the thinking of Supreme Commander Hugo Chavez, and these historical facts are marked in our contemporary history, not only by the mass media, radio, TV, and press. We also left it embodied in books for history, where we can cite books such as A Hurricane Made People. In these 333 pages is recorded these historical facts within our life and our contemporary history, and the study of the thought of Supreme Commander Hugo Chavez, a humanist, democratic, progressive, brotherly thought for people that appears inside this beautiful book that it is also for authorship. Study of the thought of Supreme Commander Hugo Chavez, the chair I have been directing for 5 years.
Going back to the historical facts, you were speaking about how Fedecámaras, the Venezuelan Workers' Confederation, and an important actor as the person who led the PDVSA allied. How did they reach to the main fact of 2002? I mean, April 11th, there was a mobilization convened, as you told me, in Chihuahua, right?
There was not only that mobilization. There was the work done through the known television channels. They are there, the television channels.
Let's say that television played a role of propaganda against the government instead of the social networks, which were at the time not as diversified as today.
Totally. There are scientific studies that determine and had determined that when people watch television, already take for granted and with high security that those facts are
The
totally
principle
true,
of likelihood.
that they are what we call a perfect truth. It's a perfect truth. That is, if TV says it so, it's true. Those channels of television created the whole network according to those business groups, the Workers' Confederation, these groups that had already begun to sabotage decisively and forcefully, almost literally, almost killing our PDVSA. With the use of television media, they managed to persuade a small mass, concentrated and convenient to trial. At dawn, media had headlines like this. For instance, the final battle will be in
What does
Miraflores.
that mean?
The final battle will be in Miraflores meant a mental, psychic, and psychological factor that was already announced. The cameras of those channels were already closed, and the route had been predetermined. There was an interior and exterior plan. There was a component of the work corporatocracy with the Creole corporatocracy. This means the oligarchy along with the media and intelligent people, because we must recognize that those who did those kind of actions were intelligent, had internal and external support, and managed to start and conduct a march known as the March Without Return.
The so-called March Without Return towards the Miraflores Palace, the headquarters of the government.
Yes, the intention was to end with a democratically elected government that had proposed a popular constituent that people had been called to put together. The deputies were elected by the Venezuelan people. They concentrated for more than 8 months, taking ideas from the people, turning it into a project that was also approved with a huge percentage of participation, and establishes the most democratic constitution in the Republican history of Venezuela.
In those events, it's worth mentioning something very regrettable, the actions in Puente Llaguno. What were those actions about? What did they try? What happened at the time?
Well, the studies we have done, because those facts were previously analyzed, the images that are projected in Puente Llaguno on television.
Puente Llaguno, in fact, really close to the Miraflores Palace.
Yes, few 60 meters, a block, and it's a bridge over a very important avenue, the Rafael Maria Baral Avenue. And the cameras that took images of Puente Llaguno had previously plotted other images even from other movements and other marches. What that comes out in the form of news comes out totally rigged. It was done in a laboratory of very intelligent schools, made by very intelligent people hired to cause in the mind the effect sought. In that case, they sought to promote globally that our government was violent, when it was the opposite, is peaceful and calls for peace and promotes peace. That the marches that participated and were unarmed and were not carrying weapons, when the real images show that at that time that those marches didn't exist. There was not such a quantity of people under the Llaguno Bridge. There was not that amount of people that the marches showed. They mixed old marches with new marches and with an historical moment that was happening there, and people call the massacre of the Llaguno Bridge. and the most affected were, unfortunately, those who defended the democratic government, popularly elected in Venezuela. They were the most affected.
In the meantime, where was President Chavez?
El comandante Hugo Chávez estaba en funciones de gobierno.
Commander Hugo Chavez was assuming his role of government in the country, careful of the situation, calling to peace, calling to concord, in constant contact with the organs of power that had full exercise at that moment, but already began to be isolated. Our official spokesman did not have the capacity. The media were perverting the reason of being a means of communication, especially the newscasts, which began in that timetable. The running schedule began to project another type of images after they called the march, after they consolidated a movement, and after they arrived very close to Miraflores, between El Calvario and Miraflores. That's the moment we see the characters who were present calling to arrive to the Miraflores Palace. Meanwhile, radio and television had a well-planned orchestration of what was to be said, what was the call that was going to be made. History attests everything that happened at that moment.
In which moment did they take President Chavez from the government's seat?
Bueno, llega un momento donde el comandante Chávez...
There comes a time when Commander Chavez explains what happened to him. He is invited to the Ministry of Defense by some officers. After he arrives there,
el comandante Chávez pierde el contacto con el pueblo y salen nuevos
the Commander
voceros.
Chavez loses contact with people, and new spokesmen come out and give the voice of what was the Commander Hugo Chavez. History is faithful. When he narrates the facts, later on when he's rescued, he says that he agreed to attend to those officers who called him to speak and who finally cut off his communication.
And they took him to Longeville Island?
Later, when we have news of the commander, is when the famous letter appears. The letter that says he has not renounced the power that people rightfully gave him. A letter that turned the world around. A letter that, miraculously, was written by the commander. He himself wrote it, and on the back of the letter appears the trace of where they had him. There on the island where he was, he draws the airstrip, draws a casino, draws a room, and within our book, Our Hurricane Made People, we can see the letter in the pages and the commentary of that letter, and the way he comments it is so patriotic. Finally, when the letter is taken from the place where they had him, in the Bay of Turiamo, is when the letter arrives at the hands of public opinion. He had already been moved to another place.
Why did they take him to the Longeville Island?
Well, one of the things we can analyze is that, first, they took him out of the mainland to an island. In this case, the island is ours. It could have been any island. Venezuela has 310 islands, but that is a very special island because it is a military base, but far enough from the continent that could have provided to any fleet, to any imperial force, the conditions to be able to take our supreme commander through a maritime communication channel, also aerial. It is an island, but it is also a point of our coast, of our territorial sea, and that they could intend to take, but did not have enough time. The actions taken by the military patriots and Venezuelan people in a civic military union were diligent, were decisive, were forceful and accomplished to rescue the commander in a short time by the Bolivarian National Army, always 100% loyal to the Supreme Commander.
That happened on April the 13th, but already before, other person held the office, the Fedecámara's president.
Of course, a few hours after having consolidated a coup d'etat against the participatory and leading democracy in our country, Carmona assumes, without elections, without consulting people, Fede Cámara simply elects one of its members as President of the Republic, and in consonance, even in agreement,
A government that lasted very little, precisely because of the popular pressure.
people hadn't chosen any one of them. They hadn't been elected by votes. Carmona and the group of ministers who were sworn conspired directly. The first thing they did was to eliminate the newborn constitution. They eliminated it through a decree as well as all the enabling laws, and also eliminated the public authorities. Because the moral power was eliminated, even all the deputies of the Assembly were eliminated, and all the deputies of the Assembly of our Bolivarian Republic were ignored. Even all the magistrates of the Supreme Court of Justice were ignored. In other words, Venezuela was only at Carmona's command, and also of the ministers appointed by him. The people were helpless. But popular response did not remain idle. People were mature enough to value the time of the Supreme Commander as president. The new constitution, the love and the hope of a people on a man, on a constitution and on laws, those facts made that people came out in a spectacular way.
Entonces, huye Carmona Estanga.
So Carmona Estanga runs away, as well as his executive cabinet, which for a few hours ruled in Venezuela. The helicopters returned with Chavez alongside people. And what happened from that moment on? In that precise moment of the departure of Carmona and the return of Chavez, who assumed the temporary power in Venezuela?
El presidente de la Asamblea, el vicepresidente.
It had to be assumed by the vice president of the Assembly at that time, Diosdado Cabello Rondon, who, permitted by law at that time, as constitutional vice president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, he was sworn. We could see it through public media. It was what the law said.
The public media had also been silenced because Venezuelan television came out of the air.
Los medios, los pocos medios que apoyaban a su gobierno y
It is correct. The few media that supported Chavez's government and the radio channels were also fighting with the people for the restitution of the Bolivarian democracy, participatory and leading. Diosdado Cabello assumed the responsibility at that historical moment, quite firmly.
Until that moment, where was Diosdado Cabello?
estaba dentro del contexto nacional aquí en la capital.
He was within the national context, here in the capital together with the deputies, along with other ministers who also manifested within radial chains through the few media that were at hand. I can remember many ministers talking, calling. They didn't agree with the elimination of the Republic. They didn't agree with the elimination of the enabling laws. They didn't agree with the elimination of the Supreme Court of Justice and all the magistrates. The coup's government had left the country without justice, without moral support. They did not know the deputies, a legal, technical, moral, historical coup d'etat, and the worst, the President of the Republic was kidnapped. Practically, our country had been brutally taken for both international organizations and external support, like never before in Venezuela's history.
When President Chavez returned, what did he devote to?
Igualmente recibido por Diosdado Cabello.
He was also received by Diosdado Cabello Rondon, the temporary president at that time. Chavez immediately assumes the functions of president and initiates in a vertiginous way the changes that had to be taken, because we already knew that coup d'etat was going to continue, or it was going to have a second or a third phase.
Para el progreso, para el desarrollo, para la paz en Venezuela.
He initiates a process of acceleration of the changes for progress, for development, for peace in Venezuela, which is represented at that moment first by the call to peace Chavez makes on April the 15th in a press conference, already active, already stable inside palace, with a holy cross in his hand, calls to peace, to comprehension. He says also that there can be an opposition, a democratic, participative opposition with which you can speak. He called to dialogue. He arrived accelerating the revolution. The missions were born, the Samaran funds. This means health, education, culture, sports came to be the priorities of the commander, besides the economic area.
Well, General, thank you very much for this historical outline that you have offered to the Telesur audience in English so that they can understand the events of April 2002.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm grateful for your invitation. And well, greetings to all the citizens of the world. And remember, Venezuela is the most friendly country in the world. God bless you.
Thanks once again.
Remember, this is from Caracas. I'm Ray Gomez. Thank you for being with us.